This is the second conversation on public libraries. Why public libraries? Because we are in this place, we are in a venue which is really linked to the public libraries field. The origins of this foundation is linked actually to the public libraries. And we are feeling that during the last 10 years, the spread of digital, the dissemination of mobile devices have a real impact on libraries and the meaning of libraries. Here with us, we have Susanne Gilling. She's from Aarhus Public Library, which is a reference for all of us that we are working in this field. And David Streatfield. Also, David is focused on evaluation, impact evaluation, and this is very important if we talk about library transformation. And Brys, who, as a CEO of Cyberlibris, is more focused on content and how to deal with the content and how to make a whole experience for the users and the patrons of the public libraries in order to have a really new, enhanced experience with content. So the very first thread that I would like to open for the three of you is do you think that there has been a big impact of the digital upon the libraries during the last 10 years? Susanne.
Yes, I think there has been a very strong impact upon digital upon the libraries, because we see that our users change. They have another behavior, and therefore the libraries, of course, has to have another behavior as well regarding library services. We see the library as an open place where you can get help and where people can come and also get help upon the digital stuff, and that's very important also about the new technology. And as James said a little before, we need to embrace the change, and we need to take a look at the spaces in new ways because we don't fill them up with books anymore. We need to look at the library spaces and use them for something different now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm going to preface what I'm saying by pointing out that I've spent the last 10 years looking at development of public libraries in emerging and developing countries. And I would say, looking across that experience and my other involvement with libraries in the developed world, that yes, there are huge impacts, but it's hugely variable as well. There are countries which have, and several in Eastern Europe that I've been involved in, where they have relaunched public libraries after communism by really capitalizing on the sort of digital agenda and providing free public access to the internet for a whole range of people who never had that kind of access before. And specifically, if you're thinking Europe, it's been the socially excluded groups, for example, the gypsies in various countries, disproportionately use public libraries. And use public libraries if they are really embracing the digital agenda. On the other hand, there are countries which are being left totally behind in this. And there are libraries in countries all around the world which are simply not keeping up. And as a result, I think will be disappearing, and they're already marginalized to the point of almost extinction. And I think the extinction will happen, certainly over the next 10 years.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Eric?
Yes, interesting that question is impact of the digital upon the libraries. In fact, the impact is first of all on myself. It changed my life. because basically 18 years ago, I decided to quit what I was doing and start a company that does digital libraries.
You used to work in the financial...
Yeah, I used to be a professor, then an investment banker. And I started the digital library as a kind of response to my frustration of being a professor and having to use only one book in the class, the required text. Dream is to share your readings with your students, and obviously the print book is not that easy to do that, and digital is a big enhancer in terms of sharing, basically. Now, I think I would disagree with what has been said. I think disorder is the reason why we have libraries, and disorder is the reason why we will have libraries for a long time. By disorder, I mean the fact that when they produced those first clay tablets in the Sumerian times, they had to bring order into something that was disorder. And this was the very beginning of the concept of a library. Now, what I see, and I'm guilty of that because I brought the usage bits into the atoms. And one way or the other, you have physical atoms, the walls of the library, you have print atoms, and suddenly usage bits, what they call big data or whatever. And they seem to collide. In fact, they don't really collide. It's just a matter of an adjustment which is fascinating to observe. When I say disorder is the reason why in the first place we have libraries, why we have librarians, top-down approach. So they try to bring some sense, some order into something that would be not that easy to handle. Now, if you look at usage bits, which we do because I'm fascinated by the digital speed at which we have data, it's like a complex system. So every patron is like a mini librarian, a librarian of himself or herself. And then when we try to understand in the sense of complexity what happens, you try to make sense of it bottom up. And you use, let me say the word, algorithm. You try to understand, is there a hidden sense there? Believe me, there is. And this is fascinating. And this is something that has to be installed into the library, into the physical library. And that's what I'm working on. And that's why I'm very hopeful about libraries. Last but not least, librarians should be very hopeful too. There is an effect called the Lindy effect. We have James from New York. Lindy used to be a kind of a restaurant. And the Lindy effect, L-I-N-D-Y, says that if you want to predict the lifespan of an object, of a service or whatever, one thing you could say that currently is at halftime. So it means that if you're 1 year old, well, my bet is that you're going to live another year. Now, if you're 1,000 years old, my bet is that you're going to live for the next 1,000 years. And libraries, for how long have been around? Long time, which is a testimony of their ability to handle disorder. Because they have gone through hectic times, and they're still there. So we should be hopeful.
I have mixed feelings about the next step in your path. I mean, when I was commissioned with some other person to design this center, the first sentence I used to say, it's not going to be a content warehouse, okay? But your idea of content warehouse I think I'm feeling that it's a very different one from the, something that is quiet and stuck over there, because I had the chance to know the project that Eric developed, and it's amazing how the patrons could engage with content. So from your approach, I would like to know, how do you see this, this statement? Is the role of the library a content warehouse, yes or no, and why? And the same for you, because I know that you worked a lot on that field.
I hate binary questions.
Well done.
And no, the question of whether it's a warehouse or it should favor distributing content, it's from day one. It's basically the tension all along the history of libraries, but not all libraries though. Because we have bibliotecas national libraries, where you would say, yes, their mission is more on the warehouse side, protection side, but thanks God we have digital to make sure that even those who are not expert can have a look at those gems, hidden gems that otherwise they wouldn't see. And you have more like public libraries who are at the other end of the spectrum, not so much about a warehouse, but making sure, and I'm an economist by training, making sure that the invisible hand that is so poor at making sure that reading is equally distributed, then there is a visible hand, the public library, that try to restore some equilibrium and make sure that it is better distributed. So I see that diversity of warehouse distribution as an opportunity, not as you have to answer yes or no.
Okay. But this is beyond reading, David.
Sure, yeah. I think that you linked the idea of the library and the digital possibilities. That's fine, as long as those digital possibilities are there. But I've been working in countries where a lot of the libraries have no real prospect of getting digitized because they can't afford the technology, however flexible or streamlined it is, or however cheap it is. But they are operating in areas where the connectivity is almost non-existent or non-existent. So you've got so if you're in a position to get on the bandwagon, whatever that is, and go places, then I think there's a big future for libraries. But I'm concerned about the opportunities that would have been there if the other libraries have been helped along. And
more than half of our patrons are in sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah, yeah. And there are interesting things happening
in Burkina Faso, in Mali, and all this. And believe me, it's changing very, very fast.
Yes, in some cases,
in many, of course.
Yeah, okay. But going on to the definition of library, the one that I heard some time ago from a guy called Lawrence Stenhouse, who worked a great deal with school libraries. And he defined the library as the place in which the student is equipped to challenge the teacher. And I still think that's the best definition of all libraries that I've come across. And in a sense, it's picking up on what you're saying about being thriving in an area of chaos. The library should be stoking the chaos. And, we hear a lot very currently about disinformation and fake news. There is a question underlying that is, fake from what perspective? What are you actually doing when you are looking for information, when you're absorbing information, when you're reading? Is what you are exposed to, does it put you in a position where you can, engage and embrace what is not the received wisdom of the given, at a given time? I think that's where libraries really come into their own.
Okay, Susanne.
Well, we think that libraries in Denmark are places for people because they are the most important ones in the libraries. And of course we have book as well, but we're not a museum for books. It's a place where people can come and learn in different ways, go to a lot of different things. And then we've been concerned about transforming libraries to what we call community centers. And that's another answer to the future of the library. And what is a community center? Well, a community center is a place that play a part in the local community, and it's a place where you can go with your local program, or you can develop things together with the library, because you need to involve people in transforming the local community as well. So you have to have a very strong connection to the local community and to develop things from there, and that's our perspective. Trying to think about how to handle the library in the future, and also to invite people into the library and say, hey, this is your space, this is possible for you to come and tell us about the idea, you can make activities on your own, this is your room, you pay it through your taxes. So that's another point of view in the, yeah.
When did you start your career as a librarian? In which year?
Sorry?
When did you start working as a librarian?
Myself?
Yeah.
20 years ago.
Okay. Do you think that patrons or users are very different now?
Yes, I think they are. I think they're much more able to help themselves, and they're much more able to help themselves because we have very good websites where they can look for information. We give recommendation of books on Facebook and on our website, etc. So yes, I think because of the digital possibilities, they've changed a lot. But I think we can see that they still need librarians to help them to find the right information. There's a lot talking about all over the world about fake news, how to find the right sources, when can I believe in what kind of information, etc. Yeah.
So both of you also agree with this idea that the digital changed somehow the users?
Yes, of course. In fact, you were talking about professors. I think a professor can no longer enter a classroom assuming that they're going to face empty heads. He has to assume that they know, they have visited Wikipedia or whatever, and he has to make a material out of this. You know, it's a big opportunity that those guys are not empty heading the classroom, but he has to challenge them and use that because, yes, there is the inventory, but there is the flow, and the beauty is to be able to connect this, and this is what a library is well equipped to do. And in terms of the library itself, I think a library has, I'm an entrepreneur, so every morning I'm asking, what is my monopoly? By monopoly, the thing that keeps competition at bay. It should be the same for library, and librarians, they have a monopoly, the library, the building. It's a unique place. And it's a unique place badly needed, as long as it is, enthusiastically adapted to the noise of the world. But you have a monopoly. And I think, like Warren Buffett would say, it's up to you to invent the moat around the monopoly. But having such magnificent buildings, usually downtown or whatever, wow. It's the wow of an entrepreneur.
Yeah. And I think that Aarhus libraries are doing fantastic things in really connecting with the communities and in really transforming themselves. And you do get a sense of, whenever you talk to anybody from this library, you get a sense of people asking themselves and challenging themselves on a daily basis, thinking about how to really connect. But I'm going to do my usual on this and say that There are good libraries out there, many, many good libraries, who really are community hubs. Unfortunately, there are a lot of libraries out there too who claim to be community hubs without any real evidence at all that they're engaging with their communities. And there are others where they are simply taking your half-life. Somehow the half-life has moved back about 5 generations, and they are in effect completely moribund, and really it would be a service to remove them so that we can focus on what is capable of really developing and transforming.
Yeah, because then the library should be the heart of our network in each community. But what do you think about the idea of network of libraries? From your point of view, it's completely different, I suppose, than Aarhus. And both views are really interesting.
Well, they are, in fact, in terms of network, I see, in fact, 2 levels. The first level is call it the internal level. The fact that you could look at all those books, I call them the orphans, waiting to be adopted by readers, There are some firms who try to connect them, a network of books, through text mining. So basically they look at books as bag of words, bag of concepts. I see books as bag of readers. So I try to work out through the current technologies, data, algorithm, and what we try to do is to see what kind of network of patrons their independent reading behavior create. That's the first level. And then we are fortunate enough to have a lot of libraries who use our service, be they in Belgium, in France, in Burkina Faso, in Senegal, in Quebec, or whatever. And then we try to connect and to do the network of network. So we look at the network is, the network of the libraries, and each library being a network drawn out of the bag of readers. And when you do that, just the discovery process, explore to discover books, is mind-boggling. I know why I wake up every morning. I wake up to see this in action. And I'm amazed by what seems to be totally chaos, disorder, and I see harmony. And harmony that I can touch, that I can seize.
Powerful. Susanne, please.
We believe very strongly in networking and partnerships, because we need to cooperate with people, and there are so many places in Aarhus where we can make network and partnerships, and therefore we've developed this partnership strategy where we have like 3 levels of partnership. The one is the strategic partnerships, the big ones. Then we have the service-oriented partnerships where we cooperate with corporations, etc., about a service. And then we have what we call the network-oriented partnerships. It's kind of friends of the library, and where we develop things together, and maybe they turn out to be a service-oriented network. So we think it's very, very important. It's also important to have the network, because you, through the network, get competences that you don't have in the organization, and from there develop with them.
And David, your perspective is unique, because you know a lot of national networks and different kind of networks, even global libraries.
Sure. So. Yeah, that's interesting, because libraries can be and should be, I think, involved in a whole range of networks. They should be communicating in professional networks, but also extending beyond libraries into other related sectors. I'm involved quite heavily at the moment, but after what I'm about to say, probably won't be for much longer, with the International Federation of Library Associations, which does an appalling job of cross-disciplinary networking. Most countries, nearly all countries, are part of IFLA. They've nearly all got library associations. I wonder how many of those library associations are capable of doing what this foundation is doing now, bringing together people from across disciplines, in related disciplines, and engaging with them on what I think are some important questions. Well, I think I've answered my own question in advance, or at least I'm assuming that this sort of thing doesn't happen habitually in library professional associations, and it bloody well should.
Okay, then, do you have any question for the James, another librarian? Shall we finish? Okay, James.
It was mentioned that libraries hold a certain monopoly, I guess, in the hearts and minds of people in the marketplace. But often when we talk about monopoly, we're also just really trying to express brand. And I was wondering, from the librarian side, what do you think is the library brand, and how should we better invest in that brand as libraries?
Well, that's a very good and a very big question. So thank you. Well, I think it's important that you all the time think about your image and how you and your brand and how you can all the time talk about it and show it. And we have realized in Aarhus that the best way to kind of rethink the brand is to work a lot with people that you and get networks, as I was talking about before, partnerships, and do things together. Because that's also a way to reach out to new patrons and new users when you interact with somebody you didn't used to interact with before. And because of this great building we've got now, the main library is called Doggen in Aarhus, it's so easy for us to get partnerships because they love the building and they want to be a part of a success. And through them, we all the time rethink the brand. Yeah.
My take on that is that Louis said that I've been focusing on evaluating the impact of libraries. And by impact, I mean the impact on users and potential users of libraries. And I spend my whole time trying to encourage people to engage more systematically in that process. And the reason is because what I'm interested in is the kind of end result that you're getting through your work. That by engaging with library users and potential users, you can get the conversations going, which will lead to the kind of branding approach that you're describing. Yeah. When you mentioned monopoly, I thought immediately of entrepreneurs. And I also thought of another word which is much more commonly used in the library world, which is niche. You know, libraries have a niche which, who wants to be in a niche when you can get out there and do stuff? You know? So my take on it very much is that by changing the nature of the discourse with users and potential users of libraries, we can change libraries. That's, I think, what drives or should drive transformation. And, you know, it's possible, we can do it, we are doing it, but we're doing it sporadically and on a small scale at the moment.
Okay. Monsieur Brys?
In fact, I know that monopoly is an ugly word. But I use it in a very positive sense, or to put it another way and to piggyback on James' remark, there is a famous Japanese koan that goes this way. What you miss, look for it in what you have. So, and I think we don't spend enough time looking at what we have. And if you look at what you have and you take the time, you see tremendous resources that the minute ago you were trying to see over there. And if you go over there, fairly good chances you won't have a moat around the monopoly. So in my own business, it took me time to realize that what I have. I could say, yeah, I have content, but I have usage bits now. What can I do with usage bits? I realized that I created a little bit of turmoil when we had our first library clients because they looked at us as barbarians. You know, you're not even librarians. You don't even have a degree for that. And still you're there. So we had to invent a common life and looking very carefully at what we have to make sure that 2 + 2 = 8 and not 3, right? So that's the idea.
Yeah. Libraries, particularly public libraries, but all kinds of libraries, have something going for them which is invisible and very, very powerful. If you do any kind of survey of perceptions of libraries, including a 17-country survey which we did, which was interesting, and you ask people about libraries, they will tell you one thing very, very consistently. Libraries are a good thing, and that does not depend on whether or not they use libraries. So even if they don't use libraries, they still see it as a good thing. Why not engage with people who see libraries as a good thing to make libraries a better thing?
Yeah, this happens in every country.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is also, it's always about the users, and
Yes.
it's the user in the center, and that's so important. That's one of the ways I think we should focus even more in the future.
Yeah.
The users and what they need and what they think.
Yep.
Okay, I'll keep that. And thank you very. Oh yeah, Joanna, please. The microphone is coming.
Thank you. We've talked about the libraries, and I'm actually very curious about the librarian in that equation, because what David was saying just as an introduction, that there are countries where the library will become obsolete. And I can see it in the UK. There are branches closing, or branches where the librarians are being replaced by volunteers. So people who take a little bit of time out of their work because they support this local hub and they think it's really, really important. They love their library. And as much as they are fantastic resources to sort of keep the doors open and help the public, they're not librarians. And how is the librarian, that science around librarian, about organizing information, etc., evolving with the evolution that we're seeing today? What is that job becoming, and what will it become in the future, if I may?
Thank you.
Well, I think we still need librarians, but of course the role is changing. They're much more focusing on networking and talking to people, involving people, but also think we see that we need people who know how to find the right information. So I think it's one from one side and something from the other side. Yeah, because it's so difficult, even though you have Google, etc., you need to find the right information. Yeah.
Some of the work I've been doing recently has been in South Africa, working with the township libraries and proposing to the township libraries that they get much more engaged in community-focused activity. And rather to my surprise, the enthusiasm for doing this is absolutely amazing. The enthusiasm and energy, and where those two things are there, you can really build. And I think, we'll see a lot of good building, good, interesting things happening. I'm not sure if that answers your question or not, but
Yeah.
My take would be that librarians could be in the course of their studies, their degrees, or in the course of their daily life. They should be convinced that as much as words in books are lovable, data are lovable. Data are a cultural object. And if I can take a very simple example, recently we were training librarians using the tools that we've been putting in place. And the reaction of the librarian made my day that very day. In fact, it made my month, maybe my year. Because she said, looking at the reading path we were creating, she said, wow, I would never thought of choosing those books, but it makes tremendous sense. And she said weak signals as opposed to strong signals. And she said we are too much strong signal and not enough weak signals. And that very day, she almost fell in love with algorithm, in the sense that it's not something that you have to fight, something that will eliminate your job. It will enhance your job.
Okay, that should be the way that digital works with the librarian work, I assume. Okay, any other queries? Thank you very much.